Hey, Nemesis here. So it's like 8 a.m. right now. I slept very late yesterday, around something around 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I usually wake up at 5, and I did wake up at 5:30 today, but that's fine because I just finished 3 Days of Happiness by Sugaru Miaki, the novel form. A little background on that: I did read the manga before, but I just think the novel is quite a considerable bit better. I read Parasite and Love too. I think they're both. Well, Parasite and Love as in the manga. I only read the manga for 3 Days of Happiness and Parasite and Love prior to reading 3 Days of Happiness, the novel. And I'll this video is about 3 Days of Happiness, the novel. I'll explain that. I think there's been some discourse about it and being like loser core, being for losers, and I think that is completely true. 3 Days of Happiness is break it down. It's about this guy who decides to sell off his lifespan. 30, he's age 20, sells off 30 years of his life, and he's basically left with $300,000 for about 3 months. But the real meat of the story is how this girl observes him. Her name is Miyagi, and she observes him for the remainder of his 3 months. So that's the review, but I want to get into spoilers. So if you haven't read it or something, read it right now. 1 minute 30 mark. Read it now. Okay, spoilers. So my favorite part was honestly in the afterword of the story, where Sugaru Miaki talked about people being sad and how they make themselves miserable because they don't want to be happy. It's that extreme that makes people fall in their own trap of despair and self pity. It was an afterword I think was considerably more resonating than the rest of the novel. Usually I grade things on like two things. If it's like really important, it'll be like if I relate to it and if I resonate to it. I think 3 Days of Happiness by the end of when I read everything, including the afterword, I think it succeeded in doing both. I think it was a great story. But it is the kind of story that by the end, I think you will think very highly of it, but by the time you age, it becomes lot less novel. So I do really like how the plot twist was that this guy's entire life, 30 years, was worth 30 yen. How is that possible? How much is 30 yen? Like I didn't just to be sure. This guy's life was worth less than $1. Like that's the plot twist. I find that like ridiculous, but I also don't find that like too far fetched because if Miyagi could have been lying, but I think she wasn't. I think this guy's life in the end was truly worth 30 yen. But then again, in the last like quarter of the story, he's given this dilemma where like, oh, he was a really good artist. I kind of relate to that too. He's a really good artist. He knew how to draw very well, but only at death's door and with Miyagi. Most importantly with Miyagi, because he spent his time with Miyagi, with a person he could focus on drawing for himself. He was able to realize his potential as an artist with like within 30 days of his life left. But instead of doing that, I really appreciate how Sugar Miyagi takes this leap and really I think the safe choice would be to let him live off his 30 days, right? Then he would might be able to be happy with Miyagi and still get to like leave an impact to the world. But I really like how Kusunoki, the main protagonist, decides to just sell off his life. He would much rather just like sell his life for just 3 days, hence 3 days of happiness. But he wasn't even like going to be happy in those 3 days because Miyagi wasn't there. He decides to sell off all his potential, his squandered potential, man. You know, just to pay off Miyagi's debts. Now, one could say this is like a very very selfish thing. It is a very selfish thing. He fought himself. He did not think of Miyagi doing this. And with the afterword in mind, I do think it's a development. Because in the beginning, I don't think Kusunoki would have done that for anyone else. He wouldn't have sold off all his life because he wouldn't have cared. The difference by the end is that he really did care about Miyagi enough to sell off all his life for to pay back her debts for 3 days. And You could say it gets in a very like fantasy. It gets in a very like dream wonderland kind of ending because Miyagi also sells off her lifespan for them to get together. So my thoughts on this is that it is again it is the type of ending that you maybe don't think as highly as you grow up because yeah, it's time. It, I personally would say if they spend more time together, they might have reached the same conclusion. But like the ending of the novel, not the afterword, says those 3 days of happiness in which Miyagi and Kusunoki have money to spend, and they can spend together. It is the happiest days of their life. It is the and you could say, well, what if they like weren't happy during those last 3 days? It was very possible. It's a very it, it's not an open ending. They were happy those last 3 days. Let's be honest, but you could certainly say they were not happy. They could like certainly be not happy during those last 3 days, and then the story would be for nothing. But Sugaru Miaki wants to make the story one of happiness, not one of, again, he didn't write it for love. He didn't write it for like a value of life. He wanted to really hammer in the fact that like valuing your time by the end of your life is what's important. Really, that's why his afterword really resonated. The afterword said something like, "Fools are people who spend their whole life avoiding happiness, and they try so hard to make themselves miserable. They try so hard. It's only when they can make up for what they've lost by the time they die. So by the time they die, they kind of realized, huh, maybe I guess this world isn't so bad, and maybe it's. He said he describes it as cruelly beautiful. I think that's it's pretty tough, honestly. I'm not surprised with as a 20 though. Like this is totally something I'd think about writing at 20. I'm nearing that age, but yeah. Yes, in the end, it's a very banal, optimistic story if you think about it that way. Not many people can like. I'd say no one in this world would be happy with just like 3 days of happiness. That's the point, right? The point is, if you make up the choice to live out your days on your own terms and with someone you love, then like that's fine. Personally, it was a bit too hopeful for me by the end, but whatever. It's hopeful enough and depressing enough to that I think the ending was earned. But again, it comes to that like the ending's again idealized, very happy. Oh, it's based off completely the fact that you consider those 3 days will be happy. It's like a must. And Sugaru Miyaki insists that oh yeah, by the end, people by their death can find peace. It's probably not that simple, but some people can believe in that. I can for a short amount of time, but it's the type of story that gets you thinking. So, is it a masterpiece? Probably. Pretty good. It's for losers. Yeah, it's for losers. Absolutely. If you've read Onani Master Kurosawa, I'm a big fan of that. That's a really good story. I think it has similar themes, but it's just Free Days of Happiness is very grandiose. It's very absolute, and I really appreciate this guy for making this story. I'm gonna read his works later. This is like again, this is like if Makoto Shinkai actually wrote thought-provoking stories instead of just like you know a fun little entertaining little love story. But it's not really a love story. It's about spending your time in the right places, not wasting it. Not an original idea, obviously, but it's good to well around in your own pity and then do things. That's kind of what I took from it. So here I am not doing my homework. Well, nothing's due. It was school started yesterday, but by the time I want to like jump into new works, I do want to remember what 3 days of happiness kind of said for me. It's good. Again, I think I'm really like growing tired of like the optimistic part of it. But for you, reader, or readers and audiences of Nemesis here, I want you to say Instead of 3 days of happiness, it should be 0 days of happiness. That's right. You would never probably find 3 days as happy as Kusunoki and Miyagi had together, which is fine because you realize that those days of happiness were in the past, and maybe that will bring you some peace. By the time you die, or by the time you find someone that's right for you, might be never. Don't worry, you would never be happy, but you can be happy enough. That's all I gotta say. All right, Denji. Should we eat Fire Punch instead, actually? And when I do finish Tsukihiro remake, I will get to reviewing that or something. Right now, it's off to a great start, but it's already like 10 minutes now. I gotta do my homework. Oh no, anything but work. One really last thing. My bucket list. Some stuff I gotta do is don't do work, don't go to school, don't make money, something like that. All right, Nemesis out. 0 days of happiness. Don't look back. Or something like